to say what would be in this type of planet, this type of environment, what type of different cultures would emerge and whatever. Maybe people in this room would notice it, but when these people produce TV for millions of people or movies for hundreds of millions of people, they don't have that luxury. I mean, you may have to go to the creative world to get maybe a more developed appreciation of alien cultures. And even then, there's still a lot of criticism about that, too, even with the printed word.
But that's would you say that's the economic barrier, that transition over to media, because it does involve interacting with millions of people who are going to spend millions of dollars?
Yeah, I mean, it is, what is, the old saying is, after you turn in the script or something, then it goes, your producers, directors, actors, and then it goes to marketing. Right, and then the marketer will say, no, you're really going to alienate this segment of the population. Yeah. And if this movie's are you going to invest $200 million in this movie, and we got to make at least $400 million to break even on this thing, because that's our moneymaker. Yeah, you really cannot have your aliens portrayed in this manner.
Well, I think that what she said earlier actually brings up a good question now, and some people don't like to talk about. I mean, when I was growing up in the 70s, music, radio, it was segregated. There were, there were the white music, which was mainstream music, because of course, white people are normal people. And then there were black radio stations, and there were Spanish radio stations. Well, entertainment is still segregated. I mean, literature is segregated. I mean, if you only have stories by black authors on an African studies shelf, then you're not really marketing them to the general public. So in a sense, it's a perpetuating cycle of both exterior and self-segregation, so that you only get a few people like, Octavia Butler maybe, who apparently a bunch of people didn't really actually know she was black, so they were kind of breaking to the mainstream. I mean, if things remain segregated, doesn't it kind of create a thing so that we aren't hearing the voice of the other when we portray the other, because we're not interacting with each other? I mean, what do you think about that?
I think there's something to be said for kind of solidifying your position, so that perhaps it's a process in which you do have a subculture where you can have that growth of a number of people, rather than just having one as the savior, messiah of a culture or a people, to develop a bunch of people that can then go out and make that difference. I think the Native American community has done that to a certain extent, where they've spent a lot of time trying to save their own culture from extinction, and then feel both strong enough and also desperate enough, because there's still cultural genocide happening in subtle and not subtle ways, that they have to go out and kind of advocate on their own part. And so I think that's what I see might have to happen, is developing these various other voices, giving them the skills and the talent before we kind of put them out there as, fodder for the cannon.
Yeah, I part of it is at least like in university settings. Okay, the thing is okay. I'm a European historian. Okay, and I focused on French popular culture after World War II. Okay, now people may not like popular culture, but no one's going to question I'm studying France. Okay, so if I were hired appropriately, I would just be put in the European, the European field of my department, and I would be doing culture.
Yeah.
So, but, if I were an American historian and I did my dissertation on Asian American science fiction writers,
right?
Okay, I would not be put in the American history department. I would be put in the Asian studies
department.
Right. Okay, so structurally, it's built in, whether it's it's self-segregation or institutional segregation. That's just how, at least in the academic world, that's how you condition. And I understand the political reasons why, because if these voices were not welcome to begin with, and we're in it, damn it, form your own department, because at least we have our base.
Yes.
Okay,
right.
But then for me, the next step is, okay, we have a base established. Maybe it's faulty because with budget cuts, guess who goes first?
Yes.
Right, okay,
Exactly.
but, okay, but when you have these bases, then, and this in sheer rational thinking of universities, okay, we got all these wonderful separate bases, should we have, because we always have to take Western Civ and not World Civ, we always have to take these core courses to introduce people to the various disciplines or whatever. So yes, it's, you have your specialties, okay? Now, it is up to the university to bring them together, to show that, because after all, the nature of research, you do specialize. You can't say, I'm a physicist. No, I specialize in certain subatomic particles, and no one even blinks an eyelash about why you specialize, but then you are still fit in to the world of physics, right? And so for me, yes, there's nothing more specializing in whatever particular studies you want to do. But the trick is, and again, it's structural, which means political and economic, is to integrate that into the true mainstream.
Right, exactly,
Yeah.
which is what I'm talking about. It's
Yeah.
like, now I'm gonna pick on the audience again. It's like this lady over here started a conversation about, on Facebook about the Klingon slave auction and whether or not the use of the word slave was offensive to black people. And I went on there and I was like, yeah, actually I walked past it and I really didn't think about it too much. But maybe I should ask my other friends that are black if they were offended, because actually I can't really be the voice of my entire community without consulting them. So I went and reposted it on my Facebook page, and there was a very stark kind of breakdown of how things felt, because the people who, black people who go to a bunch of sci-fi conventions and stuff, who were mostly people who are leading some type of alternative lifestyle, although I kind of hate to put people's, sexuality and stuff into that type of bag, right? But we're all like lesbians, goths, and kinky people that are black, and we're like, oh yeah, it's fine. Then my academic, scholarly black professor friends are like, hell no, you cannot use the word slave, that is wrong, and how has this continued to go on? I'm like, well, it's continued to go on because you go to this, conference, and then there's like 5 black people there.
Yeah.
So there aren't enough black people there to actually complain. So that's why this has gone on with no one actually asking the question, is it offensive? So I think that there is self-segregation as a protection, as you mentioned earlier, and that does have to do with things like not wanting to raise your hand and be ignored because, you're the only black person in a room, and you're in a racist college. So there is that wanting to protect our community, but at some point someone's going to have to break through the mainstream, and then when they do, they're going to have to remember what community they come from, because whether I like it or not, no offense, people, but hanging around white people all the time has affected my attitudes. So, it's like contaminated. So I have to go back to the community and ask them, is this cool? Should I? Yeah, exactly. I've been polluted by the white culture.
I totally relate.
Okay, maybe that joke isn't too funny.
I totally relate. I hang out with archaeologists, and I get that all the time from my native relatives, especially elders. Like, you know what those guys did? Yeah, of course I know what they did. I'm trying to keep them from doing it in the future.
Right.
But I understand.
So, yeah.
But I understand it, and I do have to check myself. This issue with Sarah. I was a little bit blasé about it because I was a practicing Catholic for many, many years, up until a few years ago. So I knew the process. And I knew it was a done deal. So I didn't think the community should spend a huge amount of energy fighting it. I've actually changed my mind quite a bit about it, but it's still a done deal, and I know it's not going to change the outcome. But the process, it is worth it. And I think that's what changed, and I had to go back to my community and check in and get corrected of my pollution about that issue.
Yeah.
Because I was sort of jaded about it.
I think also it's becoming really difficult to even have a simple, straightforward dialogue about something like this, because once you use the word offended, then that makes some people angry, because I don't care if you're offended, and they start going on about free speech and going off to tangent like this, and people just start getting really angry at certain words, and you can't have the conversation that you're supposed to be having.
Why do you think people do get angry at the word offended?
I have no idea.
They take it personal. They think you're talking about you, even though you're not.
Yeah.
Well,
they take it as an
yeah.
accusation.
They take it too personally. Speaking as somebody who had to do the work to overcome this reaction,
Yeah.
it's very easy to take it personally when you are one person talking to another person right there. Anger sounds personally directed at you even when it's not. And I have this argument with my partner all the time. One of us is feeling out of sorts and starts getting angry, and the other one's like, "Why are you angry at me?" "I'm not angry at you. I'm angry at the damn toaster that's not working. You just happen to be in the room. Why are you taking it personally?"
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's a social defense thing. You automatically assume that something that is going wrong is something you have to deal with one way or another. So you take that on, whether it's not supposed to be or not.
I mean, I think people should kind of try to get over it because, I mean, like, I think heterosexuality would have come to an end by now if men and women had to be upset every time, you know, the member of the opposite sex was offended.
Right.
Okay? So I think people should be able to overcome it. They just probably need to be motivated. I think we had some questions. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, on a personal level, I mean, you know, at least on my mother's side of my extended family, I had the black sheep of the family. You know, I mean, I don't fit any of the molds. You know,
Offended by that statement.
him especially. But it's just that, and also too now, especially the fact that, you know, and when they say, you know, the Asian American community, it's really the Asian American communities plural, right? You know, they're not all the same. You know, and not only that, but, you know, both sides of my family have been in America for at least for 4 generations, for over 100 years. And so I've had, you know, I grew up in the suburbs, so I'm pretty well assimilated, okay? And so, especially when I went to university, I was, you know, what was the word, a Twinkie or a banana? I mean, it was literally called that. And then, among other people, well, just don't be Asian on us, you know. I mean, you know, you know, so and remember, and the higher I went in the education scale, the more exacerbating these things were, okay. And then, and especially when a lot of well-meaning people say, "I got to get in touch with my culture." Now, you know, it's more of the world of Susie Wong type thing, and that. But what I did too was, yeah. I mean, I did what any historian and scholar would do. I went back to, you know, and studied anthropology, sociology, economics. I read, you know, Lao Tse, Confucius, Mencius. I read The Legalist, and I read the Buddhist in there. So in certain ways, I turn out to all these advisors for my well-being, and even those people that supposedly are more, in my case, Chinese than I am, that I knew more about my culture than they did. Because I did the most powerful weapon that anyone can fight against us. I accumulated knowledge. Okay, so yeah, on a certain level, I'm well versed by the so-called West and the Eastern cultures. But because of my appearance, no one will ever take me as that. You know, doggone it, you know, I have no problems convincing people I got a master's degree in computer science from Stanford. And if everyone knows me, I'm lucky to find the on switch on this. You know, so.
Okay, and I think we had a question from someone behind you.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's not so much a question. You said you came in the 70s. I remember going to site, and he knows me, so he knows this.
Well, I mean, I was a
I
kid.
was going to conventions when I would be the only black person in 2,000 people. Right.
Yeah.
And so it became an interesting concept because of the reasoning of his assimilation. You weren't allowed to assimilate if you were black.
Yeah.
Because they did not want you to. You were supposed to be this monolithic, stereotypical group of people that weren't people. You were non-people. And that's breaking down a little bit, somewhat because of science fiction, but because of a lot of other things. Music. You weren't supposed to be a ballet dancer until somebody did it. You weren't supposed to play a violin until somebody did it. Black people can't swim until somebody did it.
Right.
And Octavia Butler purposely had her books with a black shadow figure because at the time when she wanted her books on trucks, they wouldn't load them.
Right.
If it had a visible black person. But if you want to go back to your culture in this country, and you're black, try finding it. Because our culture was deliberately blocked off at a certain point. So the American culture is our culture. But nobody wants to say that. we have as much of a gift into this culture as anybody else, but nobody wants to say that either. And right now, the Yugos are going into this horrible thing because we've got a slate of people who don't want writers who have diversity being nominated for awards.
Right, exactly.
So it's not gone, and people who are sitting here being quiet about it and saying, well, no, there are 5 blacks in the room. You know, I mean, I had a lady stand on the stage that stood there and said, how many black people are in this room? And they were counting them. And they kept coming up with the same number, and she kept saying the question. And she finally said, by one more person, and they were going, who's the one more person? She was. Because their eyes were telling them but not what she was saying and not what her opinions were. And that's the problem with a lot of things. And he's funny to get Brendan when he talks to me because the Asians in this country are the good minority. You know what? And I'm sure he's shaking his head because he knows exactly what I'm talking about. They do math, and I'm using that. I hate that. But
No, it's okay.
They do math. They do this. They're so polite. They're so this. And black people are the bad minority because they're angry. Well, why should they? And the race card thing. You can say whatever you want, and that's okay. But if we answer you, we're playing the race card. That's been prevalent for years. You can call me all kinds of names, and I go, wait a minute. I'm not that. I'm this. Oh, you're playing the race card. They weren't when they harangued me for 40 minutes. And people in the science fiction community really, because it does break down faster than the culture at large, should be really the forerunners of it. They shouldn't allow people like they were doing in that new movie, just not saying anything. I heard if we don't do anything, it'll kind of go away.
Yeah, well,
Right.
I think that, first of all, I agree with you. African American culture actually is African American culture. Our roots are no longer in Africa. It's just like Mexican people, they're an amalgamated culture that has to do with people that are native Mexicans and people that are from Spain. Their roots are not, they have roots in Spain, but really, they're no longer the Spanish people. They're a new people, and we really are a new people that exist in this country that have our own history, and people have a whole lot of trouble with that.
Yeah.
People get pissed off. Why do you have Black History Month? Well, it's African American History Month because our history is in America. It is the history we know about, and we don't know whether we're from Kenya or Nigeria, so sorry. Otherwise we could just call it, otherwise we could have a holiday like St. Patrick's Day, or we could have a Russian festival or whatever, but we don't really actually know which, country we're from, so we're referring to a whole, a continent, and the people that can understand my argument the best are friends of mine that were adopted. They're like, I know exactly what you mean, because, I'm white, but I have no idea what part of Europe my ancestors came from because I was adopted. We were adopted, but we were forced into this country. We weren't adopted by our choice, but our roots are here. For most of us, we don't really know. I mean, I'm half Black and I'm half Russian Jewish. I know more about, my Russian ancestors and my Jewish ancestors and where exactly they live outside of this country than I do about my Black ancestors. But actually, my Black ancestors were here for a really long time. Really, really, really long time. The Lynchburg is named after my ancestors, so they've been in this country almost as long as people, almost as long as people who had ancestors that stepped off the Mayflower. So I agree with you. People should acknowledge that it is a type of American culture and stop trying to act like it is some other type of thing.
Well, that's something unique to America, though, isn't it? I mean, as somebody that's foreigner, that Americans always want to tell you that there's something else. I'm Irish, I'm Italian, I'm this, I'm that. And when people see that I'm English, and they'll say, where are you from? And they don't really want to know. I'm fluent, but they don't really want to know because what they want to do is they want to tell me that they're really English or they're really Irish. And they're not, you know, you're not Irish, you're not culturally Irish.